What 22-year-old Marcus Thompson was about to discover at the prestigious Whitmore Associates Auction House would expose a $70 million international art smuggling operation that reached the highest levels of federal law enforcement. Agencies and put his struggling dairy farming family directly in the crosshairs of organized crime syndicates who had spent 12 years keeping these stolen artifact trafficking networks buried beneath exclusive art auctions and high society charity events. Before we dive into this incredible story, tell us where you're watching from and if this grabs your attention. Make sure you're subscribed because what 20-time Marcus Thompson discovered at the prestigious Whitmore Associates Auction House will absolutely blow your mind up. $70 million international art smuggling operation that reached the highest levels of federal law enforcement agencies and put his struggling dairy farming family directly in the crosshairs of organized crime syndicates who had spent 12 years keeping these stolen artifact trafficking networks buried beneath exclusive art auctions and high society charity events. But let's start from the beginning. The rolling hills of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, had been home to the Thompson family dairy farm for 4 generations. 22-year-old Marcus Thompson was about to become the first in his family to lose everything, not to drought, disease, or market fluctuations, but to a foreclosure notice that arrived on a crisp October morning with the devastating efficiency of corporate bureaucracy that had systematically destroyed hundreds of family farms throughout the region during the previous decade. Marcus possessed the kind of sharp intelligence and stubborn determination that had made his great-grandfather successful during the Great Depression. But he also carried the crushing weight of $340,000 in farm debt accumulated during 3 years of declining milk prices and rising feed costs that had pushed hundreds of family dairy operations throughout Pennsylvania into bankruptcy court, while corporate agricultural giants consolidated control over regional food production through predatory lending practices and systematic market manipulation. Standing 6'2", with the lean build of someone who had spent every summer since age 12 hauling hay bales and fixing equipment under the unforgiving Pennsylvania sun, Marcus had graduated summa cum laude from Penn State's agricultural and extension education program with a double major in agricultural business management and art history, an unusual combination that reflected both his practical farming background and his passion for the European masterpieces he had studied. During a semester abroad in Florence, Italy, his academic achievements were particularly remarkable considering the physical demands of dairy farming that required him to wake at 4:30 a.m. every day for milking before driving 45 minutes through rural Pennsylvania to reach Penn State's campus for classes, then returning home for evening milking and farm maintenance that often continued past midnight during planting and harvest seasons when equipment failures and weather emergencies demanded immediate attention regardless of academic schedules or personal exhaustion. Marcus's semester in Florence had opened his eyes to how agricultural heritage and cultural preservation could create sustainable economic opportunities for rural communities. Facing industrial pressure and corporate consolidation, he had spent countless hours in the Uffizi Gallery and other museums, studying how Renaissance artists had documented agricultural life while learning about contemporary European programs that helped farming families preserve their heritage through cultural tourism and agricultural education initiatives. The contrast between European agricultural heritage preservation and American corporate agricultural consolidation had inspired Marcus's senior thesis, Agricultural Land Preservation Through Heritage Tourism, a case study of European farm-to-museum integration, which had earned recognition from the Pennsylvania Historical Society and caught the attention of agricultural economists throughout the region, who saw potential for innovative rural economic development models. The thesis had documented how European farming families had successfully transformed portions of their operations into cultural heritage sites that attracted tourists willing to pay premium prices for authentic agricultural experiences combined with historical education about rural life and traditional farming practices that were disappearing from the modern landscape due to industrial agriculture's relentless expansion. Marcus had interviewed dozens of European farmers who had preserved their family operations through heritage tourism, agritourism activities, and cultural programming that generated sustainable income while maintaining traditional farming practices, and preserving rural landscapes that would otherwise have been lost to industrial development or agricultural consolidation, but academic recognition and innovative ideas couldn't pay. The monthly mortgage payments that had increased dramatically when the family's agricultural loan had been sold to Meridian Capital Holdings, a private equity firm that specialized in acquiring distressed agricultural debt at discount prices before aggressively pursuing foreclosure proceedings that eliminated small farms and consolidated agricultural land for industrial farming operations or suburban development projects. Robert and Sarah Thompson had married in 1995 with dreams of modernizing the SH08 girdery operation that Robert had inherited from his father, investing $240,000 in automated milking systems, expanded facilities, and organic certification that would enable them to command premium prices for their milk, while maintaining the sustainable farming practices that had made Thompson Dairy a respected name throughout Lancaster County for over 80 years. Robert's father, James Thompson, had built the dairy operation from 40 acres of marginal farmland purchased in 1962 with a veteran's loan and 20 years of 12-hour days that had gradually expanded the operation while building a reputation for quality milk production and ethical treatment of livestock that attracted premium contracts with regional processors who valued consistency and reliability over volume discounting. James had taught his son that successful farming required not just agricultural expertise, but also financial discipline, community relationships, and long-term thinking that prioritized sustainable practices over short-term profit maximization. That characterized the industrial agricultural operations that were beginning to dominate regional markets during the 1980s and 1990s. The Thompson family's investment in organic certification required 3 years of transitioning from conventional farming methods while enduring significantly reduced income during the certification process. But the premium prices for organic milk had made the sacrifice worthwhile, till corporate consolidation in the dairy processing industry had eliminated most of the small regional processors who had paid fair prices for family farm production. Sarah's background in agricultural accounting and her business degree from Millersville University had enabled her to maintain detailed financial records that documented exactly how corporate consolidation in dairy processing had systematically eliminated economic opportunities for family farms throughout Pennsylvania. With over 200 family dairy operations forced into bankruptcy during the previous 5 years as corporate processors shifted their purchasing agreements to industrial operations in western states, when regional processors were acquired by Consolidated Dairy Corporation, the nation's largest milk processor, the Thompson family found themselves forced to accept prices that barely covered their production costs while watching their profit margins disappear as corporate processors prioritized relationships with industrial dairy operations that could provide massive volume at rock-bottom prices through factory-owned farming methods that prioritized efficiency over animal welfare or environmental stewardship. Sarah had spent countless hours researching alternative markets, direct-to-consumer sales opportunities, gouges and value-additive processing options that might enable small dairy operations to survive corporate consolidation. But the regulatory requirements and startup costs for most alternatives exceeded the financial capabilities of families already struggling with debt service and operational expenses. The financial pressure had forced Robert to take a second job driving truck for Patterson Construction Company, working 10-hour shifts hauling materials to construction sites throughout southeastern Pennsylvania while maintaining responsibility for twice-daily milking and farm maintenance that required his presence. Regardless of his construction schedule or physical exhaustion, Sarah had started working as a bookkeeper for other struggling farms in the county, using her accounting skills to help families navigate the complex federal programs designed to provide agricultural support while often serving primarily to benefit large corporate operations rather than the family farms they claimed to assist through bureaucratic requirements that favored operations with legal and accounting resources. Marcus had contributed to the family's financial survival by working summers for neighboring farms, agricultural equipment dealers, and construction companies.
saving every dollar for college tuition while watching his parents sacrifice their
own dreams and postpone equipment upgrades to ensure he could pursue educational opportunities that might provide alternatives to the increasingly impossible economics of small-scale dairy farming. The family's financial situation had become increasingly desperate despite their operational efficiency and organic certification premiums. With debt service requirements consuming over 80% of their gross income while leaving minimal resources for equipment, maintenance, facility improvements, or emergency reserves that could provide financial security during inevitable crises that affected all agricultural operations, the foreclosure notice from Meridian Capital Holdings had arrived with the cold efficiency of corporate legal departments that processed hundreds of similar foreclosures annually, offering the Thompson family 30 days to pay $127,000 in overdue mortgage payments plus penalties and legal fees, or face sheriff's sale of their farm, equipment, and livestock that represented for generations of family heritage and financial investment, totaling over $600,000 in current market value. Marcus, we've exhausted every option with the bank, the USDA, our congressional representative's office, and every agricultural assistance program available in Pennsylvania. Robert had explained with the quiet dignity of a man who had never failed at anything in his life until confronted with economic forces beyond his control. Meridian bought our loan specifically to foreclose on farms like ours, and they're not interested in payment plans, refinancing, or anything except forcing a sale that will net them profit when they flip the land to developers or industrial agricultural operations. The family's financial crisis had developed gradually over 3 years as milk prices declined, while production costs increased, creating a squeeze that eliminated profit margins and eventually made debt service impossible despite their operational efficiency and premium organic certification that should have provided financial advantages over conventional dairy operations. Meridian Capital Holdings had purchased the Thompson family's loan, along with dozens of other distressed agricultural loans throughout Pennsylvania and neighboring states. Implementing an aggressive collection strategy designed to force foreclosure, sales that would enable the private equity firm to acquire agricultural real estate at below market prices, while eliminating family farming operations that occupied land suitable for suburban development or industrial agriculture. The company's business model depended on rapid foreclosure, proceedings that prevented farming families from reorganizing their finances or finding alternative solutions. With legal teams that specialized in agricultural foreclosure law and had developed systematic approaches for overcoming typical delay tactics used by families desperate to save their operations. Sarah's analysis of their financial records had revealed that the family's operational performance actually exceeded industry averages for efficiency, production quality, and profitability per acre, but debt service requirements created by previous modernization investments made survival impossible. When milk prices fell below break-even levels that didn't account for loan payments on equipment and facility improvements, the devastating thing is that our farm actually works, Sarah had explained to Marcus during one of their late-night conversations about possible solutions. We produce high-quality milk efficiently, our organic certification commands premium prices, and our operational costs per gallon are competitive with much larger operations. But we borrowed money to modernize during good years, and now the debt service makes survival impossible, even though the farming operation itself is profitable. The family had explored every available option for financial relief, including USDA emergency loan programs, state agricultural assistance initiatives, refinancing opportunities, and even bankruptcy protection. But the legal complexity and bureaucratic requirements made it virtually impossible for families without expensive legal representation to navigate systems that appeared designed to benefit large agricultural corporations rather than the family farms they claimed to support. Marcus had spent sleepless nights researching agricultural law, federal farm programs, and bankruptcy options that might provide relief. Downloading forms, studying eligibility requirements, and contacting agency representatives who often seemed more interested in processing paperwork than understanding the human impact of policies that determined whether farming families could maintain their livelihoods and preserve agricultural heritage that represented generations of knowledge and investment. The most devastating aspect of their situation was that the farm itself remained productive and profitable from an operational standpoint. Their organic certification commanded premium prices, their efficiency had improved through technological upgrades, and their reputation for quality had created a loyal customer base throughout southeastern Pennsylvania that preferred supporting local family farms over purchasing mass-produced dairy products from industrial operations. But operational profitability couldn't overcome the debt service requirements that had increased dramatically when Meridian Capital purchased their loan and immediately raised interest rates while demanding accelerated payment schedules that made financial survival impossible regardless of farming efficiency or market success. Marcus's plan to save his family's farm had emerged from his art history, background, and his understanding of both agricultural economics and cultural heritage markets that his academic research had identified as potential solutions for rural economic development challenges facing farming communities throughout Pennsylvania and other agricultural regions experiencing corporate consolidation pressure. His semester in Florence had exposed him to European antique markets, where agricultural heritage items commanded significant prices from collectors and museums interested in preserving artifacts that documented traditional farming practices and rural craftsmanship that represented important cultural heritage increasingly threatened by industrial modernization. During late-night research sessions in Penn State's library, Marcus had discovered that American antique farming implements, vintage agricultural artwork, and rural heritage artifacts commanded similar prices in specialty auction markets where collectors and museums competed for authentic pieces that documented disappearing agricultural traditions and rural craftsmanship that represented important aspects of American cultural heritage. The Thompson family's farmhouse and outbuildings contained 4 generations of accumulated farming implements, vintage equipment, agricultural artwork, and rural heritage items that Marcus's art history training had enabled him to identify as potentially valuable pieces that might attract interest from collectors specializing in American agricultural history and rural material culture. His most promising discovery had been a collection of early 20th century agricultural lithographs and farm equipment advertisements that his great-grandfather had collected during the 1920s and 1930s, along with several pieces of vintage farming equipment that appeared to match items he had seen selling for substantial prices in online auction databases and antique agricultural equipment markets. Marcus had spent weeks researching comparable sales through online auction sites, antique dealer catalogs, and museum acquisition records, developing a database of recent sales that enabled him to estimate potential values for items in his family's collection, while learning about authentication requirements, condition factors, and market trends that affected pricing in agricultural heritage markets. His research had revealed that collectors particularly valued items with documented provenance that could be traced to specific farms, regions, or time periods, making the Thompson family's 4-generation collection potentially valuable because family records and photographs could provide authentication that increased market value significantly compared to similar items without documented history. The family's collection included a 1925 International Harvester advertising poster in excellent condition that had hung in his great-grandfather's workshop for 70 years. It's protected from sunlight and moisture damage that typically reduced the value of paper artifacts. Similar posters had sold for $800 to $1,500 depending on condition and manufacturer, matched with International Harvester items, commanding premium prices due to collector interest and the company's historical significance. In American agricultural development, Marcus had also identified a vintage corn sheller manufactured by the Smalley Manufacturing Company of Manitowoc, Wisconsin, in 1934, representing a transitional period in agricultural mechanization when small regional manufacturers produced specialized equipment for family farms before corporate consolidation eliminated most independent agricultural equipment companies during the post-World War II period. The corn sheller remained in working condition with all original components intact, including the manufacturer's brass nameplate and operating instructions that were often lost or damaged on similar pieces. Marcus's research indicated that working Examples of pre-1940 agricultural equipment commanded premium prices from collectors who valued functional pieces that demonstrated traditional farming methods and mechanical ingenuity. His research had also uncovered a collection of seed catalog illustrations and agricultural trade publication covers from the 1920s and 1930s that documented heritage crop varieties and agricultural practices that were no longer commercially available due to industrial agriculture's focus on standardized varieties that prioritized shipping durability and appearance over flavor and nutritional content. Marcus's research into potential auction venues had identified Whitmore Associates Auction House in Philadelphia as the most prestigious regional auction house specializing in American historical artifacts, agricultural heritage items, and rural material culture that attracted serious collectors willing to pay premium prices for authenticated pieces with documented provenance and historical significance. The auction house's website featured photographs of previous agricultural heritage auctions that had included items similar to his family's collection, with sale results that suggested realistic proceeds might range from several hundred to several $1,000 depending on bidding competition and collector interest in specific categories of agricultural artifacts. Whitmore Associates occupied a converted 19th-century bank building in Philadelphia's historic district, its marble columns and brass fixtures, projecting the kind of institutional authority and cultural sophistication that attracted wealthy collectors, museum curators, and investment buyers who viewed historical artifacts as both cultural treasures and financial assets that appreciated over time while providing aesthetic enjoyment and social prestige. The auction house's reputation had been built over 30 years of handling estate sales for prominent Philadelphia families, museum deaccessions, and specialized collections that attracted national attention from collectors interested in American historical artifacts, decorative arts, and cultural heritage items that documented the nation's agricultural and industrial development. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, Marcus had studied their monthly auction catalogs online, noting that agricultural heritage auctions typically featured 200 to 300 lots, ranging from $50 estate sale items to museum-quality pieces valued at $10,000 or more, with bidding conducted both in person and online through platforms that enabled collectors throughout the country to participate in auctions, featuring items they couldn't examine personally. The auction house's agricultural heritage specialists had developed expertise in authenticating vintage farming implements, agricultural artwork, and rural material culture items, with detailed catalog descriptions that provided provenance information, condition assessments, and historical context that helped collectors make informed bidding decisions, while ensuring appropriate market expectations for consignors hoping to sell family heirlooms or inherited collections. Marcus had identified previous sales at Whitmore Associates that included items similar to his family's collection. A 1920s John Deere advertising poster had sold for $1,200. A vintage hayrake manufactured in Pennsylvania had brought $850. And a collection of early 20th century seed catalogs had sold for $400, suggesting that his items might realistically generate $2,000 to $4,000. If bidding competition developed between collectors interested in Pennsylvania agricultural history, the process of consigning items to Whitmore Associates required submitting detailed photographs, provenance documentation, and condition reports that enabled their specialists to evaluate pieces for authentication, market potential, and appropriate auction placement based on estimated value ranges in collector interest categories that determined both reserve prices and marketing strategies. Marcus had spent 2 weeks preparing professional quality photographs of his family's items using equipment borrowed from Penn State's art department, documenting condition details, manufacturer markings, and historical features that would enable remote evaluation while demonstrating his understanding of authentication, requirements, and collector interests that affected market value. His application package had included a detailed personal statement explaining his family's farming background, the historical significance of their collection, and his academic research into agricultural heritage preservation that demonstrated his understanding of the cultural and economic value of rural material culture. artifacts while establishing his credibility as a knowledgeable consignor rather than someone hoping to dump inherited junk. The documentation process had required researching his family's farming history through county records, agricultural census data, and family photographs that could provide provenance verification for items in their collection while demonstrating the authentic agricultural context that increased value for collectors interested in documented farming heritage rather than decorative reproductions or items of uncertain origin. Marcus had included copies of historical photographs showing his great-grandfather, using some of the equipment he planned to consign, along with family records documenting the farm's operational history and community relationships that provided cultural context that serious collectors valued when acquiring pieces for personal collections or museum donations. The auction house's response had been professionally encouraging but cautiously non-committal, with senior appraiser Victoria Whitmore requesting an in-person evaluation meeting where Marcus could present his items for detailed examination and discuss realistic price expectations based on current market conditions and collector interest in Pennsylvania agricultural heritage materials. Mr. Thompson, your items appear to have legitimate historical value and market potential, though final evaluation will depend on detailed condition assessment and authentication verification, Victoria had explained during their phone conversation. Our December auction includes a special section featuring American agricultural heritage, which would provide an appropriate venue for pieces that meet our authentication and condition standards. The December auction represented Marcus's only realistic opportunity to generate money before the January foreclosure deadline, making the upcoming evaluation meeting crucial for his family's financial survival and their ability to maintain the farming operation that represented 4 generations of family heritage and investment. Marcus arrived at Whitmore Associates on a gray December morning. His father's 12-year-old Chevrolet pickup, truck loaded with carefully wrapped items that represented his family's last hope for avoiding foreclosure while maintaining the agricultural operation that had defined their family identity and economic foundation for over a century. The contrast between his battered farm truck and the Mercedes sedans, BMW SUVs, and Lexus vehicles that typically occupied the auction house's parking area made Marcus acutely aware of the economic gulf between his family's circumstances and the wealthy collectors who frequented Philadelphia's most prestigious auction house. The auction house's elegant reception area featured mahogany display cases filled with previews of upcoming auction items, crystal chandeliers that projected sophisticated cultural authority, and Persian rugs that created an atmosphere of wealth and refinement that made Marcus acutely aware of his working-class background and the economic desperation that had brought him to this unfamiliar world of high-end art and antique trading. Original oil paintings depicting 19th-century pastoral scenes lined the walls, while carefully lit display cases showcased upcoming auction highlights, including Civil War artifacts, colonial furniture, and decorative arts that represented the kind of cultural treasures that wealthy collectors competed to acquire while most American families struggled with debt service and basic financial security. Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming in today, Victoria Whitmore said with professional courtesy as she guided him toward the auction house's evaluation room. I understand you have some Pennsylvania agricultural pieces that might be appropriate for our December heritage auction. Victoria Whitmore appeared to be in her early 50s, with the kind of understated elegance that characterized successful professionals in cultural institutions, expensive but conservative clothing, perfectly styled gray hair, and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to evaluating valuable artifacts while managing relationships with wealthy collectors who expected expertise and discretion. The evaluation room featured professional lighting, examination equipment, and reference materials that enabled detailed assessment of historical artifacts, with computer access to auction databases and authentication resources that help specialists verify provenance and establish market values for items ranging from family heirlooms to museum-quality pieces. The evaluation process revealed both promising opportunities and disappointing realities about the auction market for agricultural heritage items that would determine whether Marcus's desperate plan had any realistic chance of generating enough money to save his family's farm from foreclosure proceedings that would Eliminate 4 generations of agricultural heritage and family investment. Marcus's International Harvester poster was indeed valuable and authentic, with Victoria estimating a realistic sale price of $600 to $900 based on condition and collector interest in vintage advertising materials from established agricultural equipment manufacturers, though she cautioned that final results would depend on bidding competition and overall market conditions during the December auction. This piece has genuine collector appeal and excellent condition, which should generate interest from collectors specializing in agricultural advertising and international harvester memorabilia, Victoria explained while examining the poster's printing quality and condition details. However, recent market softness in agricultural collectibles has affected final sale prices, so conservative estimates are advisable. His vintage corn sheller represented a more complex evaluation challenge, with its Pennsylvania manufacturing provenance adding regional collector appeal, while its mechanical condition and completeness affected its market value among collectors, who preferred working examples of historical agricultural equipment that demonstrated traditional farming methods. This piece has genuine historical and collector value, though the market for vintage agricultural equipment depends heavily on condition, completeness, and regional collector interest, Victoria explained while examining the corn sheller's mechanical components and manufacturing details. I would estimate a realistic sale range of $300 to $600. Depending on bidding competition and whether we attract collectors specifically interested in Pennsylvania agricultural equipment, the seed catalog illustrations presented the most disappointing evaluation results, with Victoria explaining that similar materials had become common in agricultural heritage auctions as families throughout Pennsylvania and other agricultural regions had discovered comparable collections in their farmhouses and outbuildings during the previous decade. Unfortunately, seed catalog materials have become quite common in our agricultural auctions, which has depressed prices significantly over the past few years, Victoria said with professional sympathy. I would estimate $100 to $200 for your collection, though. That assumes multiple bidders with interest in agricultural ephemera and historical documentation. Marcus's careful calculations revealed that even optimistic sale prices for his family's items generate perhaps $1,500 to $2,000, a meaningful amount for most families, but completely inadequate for addressing the $127,000 needed to prevent foreclosure on his family's farm and agricultural operations. Ms. Whitmore, I appreciate your professional evaluation, and I understand that these items have limited market value compared to my family's financial needs, Marcus said with quiet dignity, while processing the reality that his desperate plan had no realistic chance of generating enough money to save his family's farm. Would it be possible to include them in your December auction anyway? My family faces foreclosure in January, and any amount we can raise will help with legal fees and moving expenses. Victoria's expression revealed genuine sympathy for Marcus's situation, combined with the practical business considerations that governed auction house operations and their relationships with consignors, who needed realistic expectations about market conditions and sale proceeds that often disappointed families hoping that inherited items might provide solutions to serious financial problems. Of course, Mr. Thompson, we'll include your items in our December 15th auction with appropriate reserve prices that protect your interests while ensuring realistic market expectations, Victoria assured him. I only wish we could do more too. Help with your family's situation. Agricultural families throughout Pennsylvania are facing similar pressures from corporate consolidation and predatory lending practices. The auction house's commission structure meant that Marcus would receive approximately 75% of final sale prices after fees and expenses, making his realistic proceeds even smaller than the estimated sale prices while requiring him to transport items to Philadelphia and accept the risk that some pieces might not sell if bidding failed to reach reserve prices. As Marcus loaded his unsold items back into his father's pickup truck, he understood that attending the auction would represent more of a final symbolic gesture than a realistic financial solution. But he also recognized that his family deserved every possible effort to save their farm before accepting defeat and beginning the painful process of liquidating for generations of family heritage and agricultural investment. The December 15th auction date had been circled on the Thompson family calendar for weeks, representing their last hope for generating money before the January foreclosure deadline. Though Marcus now understood that even successful sales would provide only modest assistance with legal fees and moving expenses rather than the substantial sum needed to prevent the loss of their farm. Tomorrow will reveal how Marcus's appearance at the prestigious Whitmore Associates auction would attract the attention of buyers whose wealth and social connections would expose him to a world of privilege and corruption that he never knew existed, and why his humble $500 bid would trigger events that would change his life forever. Marcus Thompson's desperate plan to save his family's Pennsylvania dairy farm through selling agricultural heritage items had hit a devastating reality check at Whitmore Associates Auction House. With only $1,500, $2,000 in potential proceeds, versus the $127,000 needed to prevent foreclosure, his last hope seemed crushed. But sometimes the most desperate moments lead to the most extraordinary discoveries. December 15th dawned cold and gray across southeastern Pennsylvania, with a bitter wind that cut through Marcus's worn wool coat as he loaded his father's pickup truck for what felt like a funeral procession to Philadelphia. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was driving to an auction house filled with wealthy collectors while his family faced losing everything they had worked for generations to build. "Son, I know this isn't going to solve our financial problems," Robert Thompson said, as he helped Marcus secure the carefully wrapped items in the truck bed. "But I'm proud of you for trying everything possible. Your great-grandfather would have done the same thing, fighting until the very end to save what our family built." Sarah Thompson emerged from the farmhouse carrying a thermos of coffee and sandwiches, her eyes red from another sleepless night spent reviewing financial documents and exploring last-minute options that might prevent the foreclosure proceedings scheduled for January 15th. "Marcus, whatever happens today, remember that you've already done more than most people your age would even attempt. You're fighting for something that matters." The drive to Philadelphia took 90 minutes through Pennsylvania countryside. That told the story of American agriculture's transformation from family farms to corporate operations. Marcus passed dozens of abandoned farmhouses, their empty windows staring across fields now controlled by Consolidated Dairy Corporation and other agricultural giants that had systematically eliminated independent farmers through predatory business practices that lawmakers seemed unwilling or unable to address. Mixed among the agricultural landscape were new housing developments with names like Countryside Estates and Farm Heritage Village, suburban sprawl built on former farmland that developers had purchased from families forced into bankruptcy by the same economic pressures now threatening the Thompson operation. The cruel irony was that families who could no longer afford to farm the land were selling it to developers who would eliminate agriculture entirely while marketing their subdivisions using nostalgic references to the farming heritage they had destroyed. As Marcus approached Philadelphia's outskirts, the landscape transformed from rural to urban, with corporate office buildings and shopping centers replacing the agricultural communities that had once defined southeastern Pennsylvania's economy and culture. The transition felt symbolic of broader changes threatening rural America as corporate consolidation eliminated family businesses while concentrating economic power in urban centers that benefited from agricultural profits without understanding or preserving the rural communities that generated them. The Whitmore Associates Auction House occupied a magnificent 19th-century limestone building that had originally served as the Merchants and Farmers Bank of Philadelphia. Its classical columns and ornate brass fixtures projecting the kind of institutional permanence and cultural authority that attracted wealthy collectors from throughout the mid-Atlantic region who viewed art and antique acquisition as both aesthetic pleasure and financial investment strategy. Marcus's battered Chevrolet pickup truck looked distinctly out of place among the luxury vehicles that filled the auction house's parking area: Mercedes' class sedans, BMW X7 SUVs, Audi A8 limousines, and even a few Bentley and Rolls-Royce. Vehicles that suggested some bidders operated in economic stratospheres that most Americans couldn't imagine. The contrast made Marcus acutely aware of the economic gulf between his family's circumstances and the world he was entering for what might be the first and last time. The auction house's main entrance featured heavy oak doors carved with agricultural motifs that seemed ironic, given that most of the institution's wealthy clientele had probably never set foot on a working farm or understood the economic realities that were systematically destroying rural communities throughout Pennsylvania and other agricultural states. The doorway was flanked by brass plaques listing the auction house's founding date, its professional certifications, and membership in prestigious international organizations that verified their expertise in handling valuable cultural artifacts. Inside, the reception area had been transformed for the day's auction, with additional seating arranged to accommodate the larger crowd that agricultural heritage auctions typically attracted during the holiday season when collectors were actively acquiring pieces for personal enjoyment or gift-giving purposes. Crystal chandeliers provided elegant lighting that showcased preview displays of featured items, while uniformed staff members directed arriving bidders toward registration tables and preview areas where items could be examined before the auction began. Marcus noticed immediately that he was probably the youngest person in the room by at least 20 years, and certainly the only one wearing clothing purchased at farm supply stores rather than upscale retailers that catered to wealthy professionals and serious collectors. His work boots, worn jeans, and flannel shirt marked as someone who actually worked with his hands rather than someone who collected artifacts representing work that others had performed in previous generations. The preview area featured professionally lit display cases and examination tables, where potential bidders could inspect items scheduled for auction, with auction house specialists available to answer questions about provenance, condition, and estimated values that helped serious collectors make informed bidding decisions. Marcus walked through the displays, noting items that made his family's collection seem modest by comparison, museum-quality pieces with price estimates reaching into the thousands of dollars. A Civil War-era cavalry saddle was estimated at $3,000, $5,000, while a collection of 19th-century agricultural implements from a Virginia plantation carried estimates of $8,000, $12,000. A complete set of Carrier and Ivy's agricultural prints was expected to bring $15,000, $20,000, making Marcus realize that serious collectors operated in financial ranges that his family couldn't imagine, while his own items represented the bottom tier of the auction house's offerings. The registration process required providing identification, financial references, and deposit arrangements that ensured successful bidders could complete their purchases, with auction house staff explaining bidding procedures, payment terms, and collection arrangements for purchased items. Marcus provided his driver's license and bank information, hoping that his modest checking account balance wouldn't disqualify him from participating in an auction where some items would sell for more money than his family earned in a year. "First time at Whitmore Associates?" asked the registration clerk, professionally dressed woman whose tone suggested she had immediately identified Marcus as someone who didn't belong in their usual clientele. Our agricultural heritage auctions attract bidders from throughout the country, so competition can be quite intense for desirable pieces. "Yes, ma'am." "One have a few family items in today's auction," Marcus replied, accepting his bidder paddle number 247 while noting that the auction would include nearly 300 lots, suggesting substantial interest in agricultural collectibles among wealthy buyers who viewed farming artifacts as cultural curiosities rather than tools that represented their livelihood and family heritage. The bidder registration area buzzed with conversations that revealed the diverse backgrounds and interests of serious collectors who regularly attended agricultural heritage auctions. Marcus overheard discussions about museum acquisitions, investment potential, decorating projects that suggested many bidders viewed agricultural artifacts as aesthetic objects rather than historically significant items that documented disappearing aspects of American rural culture. The International Harvester Advertising Collection should generate significant interest, observed a well-dressed man examining the auction catalog. Corporate advertising materials from the early 20th century have appreciated considerably as collectors recognize their historical significance in documenting American industrial development. "I'm particularly interested in the Pennsylvania manufactured pieces," replied an elderly woman wearing expensive jewelry that probably cost more than Marcus's college tuition. regional provenance adds considerable value for collectors interested in specific geographic areas or manufacturing traditions. Marcus realized that these collectors approached agricultural artifacts from entirely different perspectives than his family, who viewed their inherited items as functional objects that had served practical purposes in their ancestors' daily lives rather than decorative pieces that represented abstract historical concepts or investment opportunities. As Marcus moved through the preview area, examining lots scheduled for auction, began encountering the kind of wealthy collectors and dealers who formed the core clientele for prestigious auction houses throughout the Mid-Atlantic region. Conversations revealed sophisticated understanding of market trends, authentication requirements, and investment strategies that treated cultural artifacts as financial assets, rather than historical objects with emotional or cultural significance. "Marcus Thompson, isn't it?" said a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, extending his hand with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to social leadership and economic authority. "I'm Harrison Blackwell, president of Blackwell Antiquities and Fine Arts, Victoria. Whitmore mentioned that you have some family pieces in today's auction." Harrison Blackwell wore a tailored charcoal wool suit that probably cost more than Marcus's family spent on clothing in 5 years. With gold cufflinks and an expensive watch that suggested wealth accumulated through successful business operations, rather than inherited family money, his handshake was firm and his manner professionally friendly, though his eyes assessed Marcus with the calculating attention that successful businessmen applied to evaluating potential opportunities or threats. "Yes, sir. Just a few items from our farm. Nothing too exciting compared to the museum-quality pieces I've been seeing," Marcus replied with respectful honesty, while wondering why a prominent antique dealer would bother introducing himself to someone whose modest consignments represented the bottom tier of the day's offerings. "Family farm pieces often have the most interesting provenance stories," Blackwell observed with apparent interest. "Collectors increasingly value authentic agricultural items with documented family histories over pieces with uncertain origins, even if the documented pieces are less elaborate or valuable than museum acquisitions." The conversation attracted attention from other nearby bidders who seemed curious about the young farmer, whose presence had generated interest from one of the region's most prominent antique dealers. Marcus found himself introduced to a succession of collectors, dealers, and museum representatives whose wealth and social positions made him increasingly aware of his outsider status in this world of cultural sophistication and economic privilege. "This is Dr. Patricia Ashworth from the Metropolitan Museum's American Wing," Blackwell said, introducing an elegant woman whose expensive clothing and confident manner suggested academic success combined with social prominence. "Patricia specializes in 19th and early 20th century American material culture, including agricultural artifacts and rural heritage items." Dr. Ashworth's interest in Marcus's family background and farming operations seemed genuine, though her questions revealed the academic perspective that treated agricultural heritage as historical subject matter rather than living tradition that continued to shape rural communities and family identities throughout Pennsylvania and other agricultural regions. "Your family's four-generation operation will provide fascinating documentation of agricultural continuity and change in southeastern Pennsylvania," Dr. Ashworth observed with scholarly enthusiasm. "Academic research increasingly recognizes the importance of family farming operations as repositories of traditional knowledge and cultural practices that industrial agriculture has largely eliminated. Unfortunately, our farming operation may not continue much longer." Marcus replied with quiet honesty about his family's financial situation. "Economic pressures from corporate consolidation have made survival extremely difficult for independent dairy operations throughout our region." The admission created an uncomfortable moment of silence that revealed how divorced the auction house's wealthy clientele was from the economic realities affecting rural communities, whose heritage they collected and displayed as cultural artifacts. For collectors, agricultural items represented nostalgic connections to an idealized rural past, while for Marcus's family, farming remained a contemporary struggle against corporate forces that threatened their survival. The auction proper began at 10 a.m. in Whitmore Associates' main gallery, magnificent room with cathedral ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and mahogany paneling that created an atmosphere of cultural authority and economic privilege designed to make bidders feel they were participating in important cultural activities rather than simple commercial transactions. Auctioneer Victoria Whitmore took her position at an elegant podium equipped with modern sound systems and computer displays that enabled real-time coordination with online bidders throughout the country who were participating remotely through digital platforms that had expanded auction house reach far beyond local collectors. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Whitmore Associates December Agricultural Heritage Auction, Victoria announced with professional authority that commanded immediate attention from the gallery filled with serious collectors, dealers, and museum representatives. Today's sale features 287 lots representing American agricultural history from the colonial period through the mid-20th century. Particular emphasis on Pennsylvania and Mid-Atlantic regional materials. The early lots consisted primarily of high-value items that generated intense bidding competition among collectors who had traveled significant distances to participate in person, while online bidders competed through digital platforms that enabled real-time participation from throughout the country. A colonial-era plow sold for $12,000 to a phone bidder, while a collection of 19th-century farming tools brought $8,500 from a museum representative bidding on behalf of an institution expanding their American agricultural displays. Marcus watched the proceedings with growing amazement at the prices that agricultural artifacts commanded among wealthy collectors, who viewed farming heritage as cultural curiosities rather than practical tools that had enabled their ancestors' survival and economic development. The disconnect between collectors' aesthetic appreciation and farmers' practical experience seemed to represent broader divisions between urban wealth and rural economic reality that characterized contemporary American society. Lot 47, a magnificent Carrier and Ives lithograph depicting Pennsylvania farm life. Circa 1876. Victoria announced as auction house staff displayed the framed piece for bidder examination. Bidding opens at $2,000. The lithograph generated immediate competition among several bidders, the prices escalating rapidly through $3,000, $4,000, and ultimately selling for $6,200 to a collector, whose casual bidding manner suggested that such expenditures represented routine acquisitions rather than significant financial commitments. Marcus realized that individual items were selling for amounts that exceeded his family's monthly farm income, highlighting the economic gulf between agricultural producers and cultural consumers. As the auction progressed through increasingly valuable lots, Marcus noticed patterns in bidding behavior that revealed the sophisticated market knowledge and financial resources that characterized serious collectors. Certain bidders specialized in specific categories. One woman consistently bid on textile-related items, while a man near the front focused exclusively on mechanical implements that demonstrated technological innovation in agricultural development. The presence of museum representatives added another dimension to bidding competition, with institutional buyers often willing to pay premium prices for pieces that would enhance their educational displays, while providing tax benefits for donors who contributed acquisition funds. Marcus observed several lots sell to museums for prices that exceeded private collector estimates, suggesting that institutional competition could drive final sale prices significantly above conservative auction house estimates. Marcus's items were scheduled as lots 201, 202, and 203, placing them in the afternoon session when bidder attention might be flagging after several hours of auction activity. The timing wasn't ideal for maximizing sale prices, but Marcus understood that auction houses typically scheduled lower-value items during less desirable time slots while reserving prime morning and early afternoon positions for lots expected to generate significant bidding interest and commission revenue. Lot 201, a 1925 International Harvester advertising poster in excellent condition, consigned by the Thompson family of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Victoria announced as staff members displayed Marcus's great-grandfather's poster that had hung in his workshop for 70 years. This authentic period piece documents early 20th century agricultural marketing and represents excellent preservation of paper advertising materials from this significant manufacturer. Bidding opened at $200, with immediate interest from several collectors who recognized the poster's authenticity and excellent condition. Marcus felt his heart racing as the price climbed through $300, $400, and $500, exceeding Victoria's conservative estimates while generating more competition than he had dared hope. $600, now $650. Will you say $700? Victoria called as two serious bidders competed for the poster. This is an exceptional example of international harvester advertising with documented Pennsylvania farm provenance. The bidding stalled at $650, with Victoria working to encourage additional increments, while Marcus realized that his most valuable item would sell for less than he had hoped, but more than Victoria's conservative estimate. The final price of $650 generated polite applause from the gallery, though Marcus noticed some condescending smiles from wealthy bidders who considered such amounts insignificant compared to the thousands of dollars they routinely spent on individual acquisitions. Lot 202, a vintage corn sheller manufactured by Smalley Manufacturing Company, Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Circa 1934, Victoria continued as staff members displayed the mechanical device that Marcus's great-grandfather had used for decades before. Mechanical corn pickers made such hand-operated equipment obsolete. This piece remains in working condition with all original components intact, representing transitional technology in American agricultural mechanization. The corn sheller generated less enthusiasm than the poster, with bidding opening at $150 and progressing slowly through small increments that suggested limited collector interest in mechanical agricultural implements compared to advertising materials and decorative items. Marcus watched nervously as the price struggled to reach $300, with only two bidders showing sustained interest in the piece. $350? Will you say $400? Victoria encouraged, though her tone suggested she was working harder to generate interest in the corn sheller than had been necessary for more popular lots earlier in the auction. This is authentic Pennsylvania farm equipment with complete operating instructions and excellent mechanical condition. The corn sheller ultimately sold for $375 to a collector who specialized in mechanical implements, generating modest applause while Marcus calculated that his second item had performed slightly better than Victoria's conservative estimates, but significantly below his optimistic hopes for funding that might help address his family's financial crisis. Lot 203, a collection of early 20th century seed catalog illustrations and agricultural trade publication covers, consigned by the Thompson family. Victoria announced with professional courtesy that couldn't entirely mask her limited enthusiasm for agricultural ephemera that had become common in recent auctions. These materials document heritage crop varieties and agricultural practices from the 1920s and 1930s, providing historical research value for scholars and collectors interested in American agricultural development. The seed catalog collection generated minimal bidding interest, with opening bids starting at $50 and progressing slowly through small increments that reflected the market's saturation Victoria had warned about during Marcus's evaluation meeting. Only one serious bidder seemed interested in the materials, though several others made token bids that suggested polite support rather than genuine acquisition interest. $75? Now $100? Will you say $125? Victoria worked to encourage additional bidding while Marcus realized that his final item would generate the smallest proceeds of his 3 lots. These materials have research value for agricultural historians and collectors interested in documenting heritage crop varieties. The collection ultimately sold for $115 to a dealer who specialized in agricultural ephemera, generating polite but unenthusiastic applause from the gallery while Marcus calculated his total proceeds from 3 family items that had taken weeks to research, evaluate, and prepare for auction. His total gross proceeds of $1,140 would be reduced by auction house commissions and fees to approximately $850, representing meaningful money for most families, but completely inadequate for addressing the $127,000 needed to prevent foreclosure. On his family's farm, the crushing reality was that even successful sales of his family's most valuable, inherited items would provide only modest assistance, with legal fees and moving expenses rather than the substantial funding needed to save their agricultural operation. As the auction concluded and successful bidders arranged payment and collection procedures for their purchases, Marcus found himself surrounded by collectors, whose casual conversations about their acquisitions highlighted the vast economic differences between his desperate circumstances and their comfortable collecting activities. "I'm quite pleased with that Carrier and Ivy's piece," observed Dr. Ashworth to Harrison Blackwell as they stood near Marcus while completing their purchase paperwork. $6,000 was reasonable for such excellent condition, and it will complement our Pennsylvania agricultural display beautifully. "The International Harvester poster was a nice addition to my advertising collection," replied another collector who had successfully bid on Marcus's great-grandfather's poster. "Authentic pieces with documented farm provenance are becoming increasingly difficult to find as families liquidate their agricultural heritage." The casual reference to families liquidating their agricultural heritage struck Marcus as particularly painful.
Ow.
Since these collectors viewed such liquidations as convenient opportunities to acquire authentic pieces while the family's forcing, such sales faced the destruction of their livelihoods and cultural identity that these artifacts represented. "Young man, I hope your family's financial situation improves," Harrison Blackwell said to Marcus with what appeared to be genuine sympathy, though his tone suggested the kind of charitable concern that wealthy people express toward economic problems they couldn't understand or address. Agricultural families throughout Pennsylvania are facing similar pressures from corporate consolidation and economic changes that make traditional farming operations difficult to maintain. The conversation attracted attention from other nearby collectors who seemed curious about the young farmer whose modest consignments had generated discussion among prominent dealers and museum representatives. Marcus found himself the subject of polite but patronizing interest from people whose wealth enabled them to collect agricultural artifacts while remaining completely disconnected from the economic realities that were destroying the rural communities and family operations that had created such heritage items. "Have you considered transitioning to agricultural tourism or heritage education activities that might provide alternative income sources?" suggested Dr. Ashworth, with academic enthusiasm for innovative rural economic development strategies. Many farming families have successfully diversified their operations through educational programming and cultural tourism that enables them to maintain their agricultural heritage while generating supplemental income. "Unfortunately, our financial situation requires immediate solutions rather than long-term development projects," Marcus replied with polite honesty, recognizing that these well-meaning suggestions reflected the kind of theoretical approaches that academics and cultural professionals propose without understanding the practical obstacles facing families in crisis situations. The patronizing attention was becoming increasingly uncomfortable as Marcus realized that he had become a curiosity for wealthy collectors, who viewed him as an authentic representative of the agricultural heritage they collected but didn't experience. As contemporary economic reality, his presence at the auction house made him a living symbol of the rural culture that these urban professionals romanticized while remaining completely insulated from the corporate and political forces that were systematically destroying farming communities throughout Pennsylvania and other agricultural regions. As Marcus prepared to leave the auction house with his modest check and the crushing realization that his desperate plan had failed to generate meaningful financial relief for his family's crisis, he noticed a man in an expensive charcoal wool overcoat who had been observing the proceedings from the back of the gallery without participating in any bidding activities. The man appeared to be in his 50s, with graying hair and the kind of quiet authority that suggested professional success and institutional responsibility rather than the social prominence that characterized most auction house regulars. Unlike other attendees who had dressed to display their wealth and cultural sophistication, this observer wore understated clothing that projected competence and seriousness rather than economic status or artistic sensibility. "Mr. Thompson, might I have a word with you before you leave?" The man approached Marcus with respectful courtesy while displaying federal credentials that identified him as Special Agent Robert Chen of the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Art Crime Team. I've been monitoring today's auction as part of an ongoing investigation, and your items have provided some interesting connections to our case. The revelation that an FBI agent had been monitoring the auction created immediate concern about whether Marcus had unknowingly violated federal laws or regulations governing the sale of historical artifacts. Though Agent Chen's manner suggested professional interest rather than criminal investigation of Marcus's activities. "Am I in some kind of trouble, Agent Chen?" Marcus asked with growing anxiety about complications that might affect his family's already desperate situation. "I researched authenticity and provenance requirements before consigning our items, and I believe everything was legitimate family heritage. You're not in any trouble, Mr. Thompson." Agent Chen assured him with professional courtesy that suggested genuine respect for Marcus's situation and concerns. "However, your family's agricultural items have provided authentication and provenance information that connects to a federal investigation into systematic art fraud and money laundering operations that have been using agricultural heritage auctions to legitimize stolen and counterfeit artifacts." The explanation transformed Marcus's understanding of the day's events from disappointing financial failure to accidental involvement in federal law enforcement operations targeting sophisticated criminal activities that exploited legitimate auction houses and unsuspecting consignors to disguise illegal financial transactions. The FBI has been investigating Whitmore and Associates and several other prestigious auction houses that have been unknowingly used by international criminal organizations to launder money through fraudulent art and antique sales. Agent Chen continued with information that revealed the scope of federal concerns about systematic exploitation of cultural institutions. "Your authentic family items with documented provenance have helped our investigation distinguish between legitimate consignments and fraudulent lots that lack proper authentication. The revelation that his family's genuine agricultural heritage items had provided federal investigators with comparative authentication standards suggested that Marcus had accidentally contributed to law enforcement operations designed to protect legitimate auction houses and honest collectors from systematic criminal exploitation. Tomorrow, we'll reveal how Agent Chen's investigation had been tracking a sophisticated international money laundering operation that used agricultural heritage auctions to disguise illegal financial transactions, and why Marcus's innocent attempt to save his family's farm had accidentally provided federal investigators with crucial evidence about criminal networks that reached far beyond auction house fraud. Marcus Thompson's desperate attempt to save his family farm through selling agricultural heritage items had netted only $850, a crushing failure against the $127,000 needed to prevent foreclosure. But as he prepared to leave Whitmore Associates Auction House, FBI Special Agent Robert Chen approached him with shocking news. Marcus's authentic family items had accidentally helped federal investigators distinguish legitimate artifacts from fraudulent lots in a massive international money laundering operation. What Marcus didn't know was that this chance encounter would connect him to a family secret that would change everything. Special Agent Robert Chen guided Marcus to a quiet corner of the auction house's reception area, away from the wealthy collectors who were completing their purchase arrangements and discussing their acquisitions with the casual enthusiasm of people for whom spending thousands of dollars on cultural artifacts represented routine entertainment rather than significant financial commitment. "Mr. Thompson, I want to assure you again that you and your family are not suspected of any wrongdoing." Agent Chen began with the careful professionalism that federal agents used when briefing civilian witnesses about complex criminal investigations. "In fact, your family's authentic agricultural items have provided our investigation with crucial authentication standards that help us identify fraudulent lots that criminal organizations have been using to disguise illegal financial transactions." Marcus struggled to process the revelation that his family's genuine heritage items had somehow become evidence in a federal criminal investigation. While he had been focused entirely on their modest financial value in his desperate hope that auction proceeds might help prevent foreclosure on his family's farm. "I don't understand how our old farm equipment and family collectibles could be relevant to federal law enforcement," Marcus said with honest confusion about connections between rural Pennsylvania agricultural heritage, and sophisticated criminal activities that required FBI investigation. These items have been in our family for generations, and I researched their authenticity and provenance carefully before consigning them to the auction. Agent Chen's explanation revealed the sophistication of international criminal organizations that had developed systematic methods for exploiting legitimate auction houses, honest collectors, and authentic cultural artifacts to disguise money. Laundering operations that moved illegal proceeds through seemingly legitimate art and antique markets. International criminal syndicates have been using prestigious auction houses throughout the United States and Europe to launder money through fraudulent art and antique sales that appear to be legitimate cultural transactions, Agent Chen explained. While displaying photographs and documentation that revealed the scope of federal concerns about systematic exploitation of cultural institutions, the photographs showed auction catalogs, sale records, and authentication documents that demonstrated how criminal organizations had developed sophisticated forgery and provenance fabrication capabilities that enabled them to create fraudulent lots that appeared legitimate to auction house specialists and serious collectors who lacked access to advanced forensic authentication resources. The criminals create fake agricultural heritage items with fabricated provenance documentation that mimics authentic family collections like yours. Agent Chen continued with information that revealed how Marcus's genuine items had provided federal investigators with comparative standards for detecting systematic fraud. Your family's documented 4-generation farming history and authentic artifacts help our forensic specialists distinguish between legitimate consignments and criminal fabrications. The revelation transformed Marcus's understanding of the auction world from a sophisticated cultural marketplace into a potential crime scene where international criminals exploited legitimate institutions and honest participants to disguise systematic violations of federal laws governing financial transactions and international trade. How extensive is this criminal activity? Marcus asked, with growing concern about whether his participation in the auction had unknowingly exposed his family to dangerous criminal organizations that might retaliate against witnesses who could provide evidence for federal prosecution efforts. Agent Chen's response revealed the international scope of criminal operations that had been targeting cultural institutions throughout the United States and allied nations. With sophisticated coordination between criminal organizations that shared forgery techniques, money laundering methods, target identification strategies that enabled systematic exploitation of auction houses and collectors. Federal investigation has identified over $70 million in fraudulent transactions through agricultural heritage auctions during the past 3 years. Agent Chen explained with information that revealed the massive scale of criminal exploitation that had been operating without detection by auction house security or law enforcement oversight. The criminals specifically target agricultural collectibles because rural provenance is difficult to verify and family documentation is often incomplete or unavailable. Exploitation of rural communities already facing economic pressures from corporate consolidation and predatory lending practices that forced farming families to liquidate their cultural heritage, while criminal organizations profited from systematic fraud that damaged legitimate collectors and auction houses. The fraudulent lots often sell for prices that far exceed authentic items because criminal bidders artificially inflate prices to justify moving large amounts of illegal money through seemingly legitimate transactions. Agent Chen continued, with information that explained why some agricultural items at prestigious auctions commanded prices that seemed inconsistent with normal collector markets. Marcus realized that his family's authentic items had probably been undervalued, not just because of their modest historical significance, but because legitimate market prices couldn't compete with criminal organizations that used fraudulent bidding to justify money laundering transactions that required moving specific amounts of illegal proceeds through auction house payment systems. Agent Chen's briefing revealed that the Federal Bureau of Investigation's art crime team had been conducting a comprehensive investigation into international money laundering operations that exploited cultural institutions throughout the United States and allied nations, with particular focus on auction houses that handled agricultural heritage items and rural material culture artifacts. Our investigation began 18 months ago when customs officials detected patterns in international art shipments that suggested systematic fraud involving agricultural collectibles and rural heritage items. Agent Chen explained while displaying federal documents that revealed the scope of international cooperation required to address criminal activities that crossed national boundaries and jurisdictional limitations. The investigation had revealed sophisticated criminal networks that operated across multiple countries, with specialized teams responsible for creating fraudulent artifacts, fabricating provenance documentation, manipulating auction house procedures, and laundering illegal proceeds through legitimate financial institutions that processed payments for cultural transactions. The criminal organizations specifically recruited experts in agricultural history, rural material culture, and antique authentication to develop forgery capabilities that could deceive auction house specialists and serious collectors. Chen continued with information that revealed how criminal enterprises had systematically corrupted legitimate cultural expertise for illegal purposes. The recruitment of authentic cultural experts represented a particularly sophisticated aspect of the criminal operation that enabled systematic fraud while making detection extremely difficult for auction houses and collectors who relied on traditional authentication methods that the criminals learned to circumvent through inside knowledge and expert technical capabilities. Federal surveillance identified 3 primary criminal organizations operating in the United States, with connections to similar operations in Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, several European nations, where agricultural heritage markets have been similarly exploited. Agent Chen explained with information that revealed the international scope of systematic fraud that threatened cultural institutions throughout the democratic world. The international coordination suggested that agricultural heritage fraud represented part of broader criminal strategies that targeted cultural institutions as vehicles for money laundering, tax evasion, and illegal financial transactions that required sophisticated authentication and provenance fabrication capabilities. The criminals have been particularly active in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, and other agricultural states where farming families facing economic pressures provide cover for fraudulent consignments that appear to represent legitimate family liquidations. Agent Chen continued with information that revealed how economic distress in rural communities had been systematically exploited by international criminal organizations. The exploitation of rural economic distress represented a cruel irony, where farming families forced to sell their heritage items for survival unknowingly provided cover for criminal organizations that profited from systematic fraud while contributing to the cultural and economic destruction of rural communities already facing corporate consolidation and predatory lending practices. Agent Chen's explanation revealed that Marcus's family items had provided federal investigators with crucial authentication standards that enabled forensic specialists to identify systematic patterns in fraudulent lots that had been appearing at prestigious auction houses throughout the Mid-Atlantic region and other areas where agricultural heritage auctions attracted serious collector interest. Your great-grandfather's international harvester poster provided our authentication team with genuine printing characteristics, paper composition, and aging patterns that help us distinguish authentic period pieces from sophisticated forgeries that criminal organizations have been producing. Agent Chen explained while displaying forensic analysis reports that revealed the scientific methods used to detect systematic fraud. The forensic analysis had revealed that criminal organizations had developed remarkably sophisticated forgery capabilities that included period-appropriate paper production, authentic aging techniques, and printing methods that closely replicated early 20th century advertising materials, making detection extremely difficult without access to genuine comparison pieces like Marcus's family artifacts. Your cornscheller provided similar authentication value because our forensic specialists could examine genuine manufacturing techniques, metal composition, and wear patterns that represent authentic agricultural use over decades of farming operations. Agent Chen continued with information that revealed how Marcus's family heritage had contributed to protecting other collectors and auction houses from systematic criminal exploitation. The authentication value of Marcus's genuine agricultural items extended beyond their individual significance to provide federal investigators with scientific standards that enabled detection of systematic fraud patterns across multiple auction houses and geographic regions where criminal organizations had been operating. The seed catalog collection was particularly valuable because paper ephemera represents one of the most difficult categories for authentication. And criminal organizations have been producing sophisticated forgeries of agricultural publications that are nearly impossible to detect without genuine comparison materials. Agent Chen explained with information that revealed how even Marcus's least valuable items had contributed to federal law enforcement efforts. The systematic nature of criminal forgery operations had required federal investigators to develop enhanced authentication capabilities that combined traditional art historical expertise with advanced scientific analysis that could detect subtle differences between genuine artifacts and sophisticated criminal reproductions. Federal investigation has used your family's authentic items to identify over 200 fraudulent lots that have appeared at auction houses throughout Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and Delaware during the past 2 years, Agent Chen revealed. With information that demonstrated the massive scope of criminal activity that had been operating without detection by auction house security or collector oversight, the scale of fraudulent activities suggested that legitimate auction houses and honest collectors had been systematically victimized by criminal organizations that exploited their cultural expertise and market knowledge while undermining confidence in authentication procedures that cultural institutions depended on for legitimate operations. Agent Chen's briefing revealed that the agricultural heritage fraud operation represented part of a broader international criminal enterprise that used cultural artifacts to launder money generated through drug trafficking, human trafficking, weapons smuggling, other serious crimes that generated illegal proceeds requiring sophisticated laundering techniques to avoid detection by financial oversight agencies. Federal investigation has identified connections between the agricultural heritage fraud operation and national criminal organizations that specialize in exploiting cultural institutions for money laundering purposes. Agent Chen explained. While displaying intelligence reports that revealed the scope of international cooperation required to address systematic threats to cultural institutions, the international connections included criminal organizations in Eastern Europe that specialized in sophisticated forgery production, South American networks that provided money laundering services, and Asian criminal enterprises that coordinated international shipping and customs avoidance for fraudulent cultural artifacts. The agricultural heritage operation specifically targets American rural communities because farming families facing economic distress provide ideal cover for criminal consignments that appear to represent legitimate family liquidations. Agent Chen continued with information that revealed how rural economic problems had been systematically exploited by international criminals. The targeting of rural communities represented a particularly cruel aspect of the criminal enterprise that profited from the economic destruction of farming families while undermining the cultural institutions that preserved rural heritage and provided legitimate economic opportunities for collectors and auction houses. Federal counterintelligence analysis suggests that some of the international criminal organizations involved in cultural artifact fraud have connections to foreign intelligence services that seek to undermine American cultural institutions while generating illegal funding for espionage and political interference operations. Agent Chen revealed with information that transformed the investigation from simple financial crime to potential national security threat. The national security implications suggested that cultural artifact fraud represented more than financial crime, potentially serving foreign intelligence objectives that sought to damage American institutions while providing funding for activities that threaten democratic governance and international security. The scale and sophistication of the criminal operations suggest coordination with foreign intelligence services that have developed cultural institution targeting as part of broader strategies for undermining democratic societies through economic and cultural disruption. Agent Chen continued with classified information that revealed the international scope of threats to American cultural sovereignty. The foreign intelligence connections transformed Marcus's accidental involvement from simple law enforcement cooperation to potential contribution to national security operations that protected American cultural institutions from systematic foreign exploitation and intelligence penetration. As Agent Chen Kyun concluded his briefing about the federal investigation and Marcus's unintentional contribution to law enforcement efforts, he revealed information that would transform Marcus's understanding of his family's connections to federal law enforcement and national security operations. Mr. Thompson, before we discuss next steps in our investigation, I need to share some information about your family background that's relevant to your safety in our ongoing operations, Agent Chen said with the careful tone that federal agents used when revealing classified information to civilian witnesses, whose cooperation required understanding sensitive aspects of national security investigations. I'm not sure what you mean about family background. Marcus replied with confusion about how his rural Pennsylvania farming heritage could be relevant to federal investigations into international criminal organizations and sophisticated art fraud operations. Agent Chen's explanation revealed family connections that Marcus had never understood, involving relatives whose federal service had remained classified due to national security requirements and operational security considerations that protected both family members and sensitive government operations from potential foreign intelligence targeting. Your uncle, David Thompson, is currently serving as Associate Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Agent Chen revealed with information that completely transformed Marcus's understanding of his family's connections to federal law enforcement and his accidental involvement in criminal investigations. The revelation that his father's younger brother held one of the highest positions in federal law enforcement created immediate understanding of why Agent Chen had approached Marcus with such careful professionalism and why his family's situation might receive special attention from federal investigators. Uncle David works for the FBI, Marcus asked with amazement about family information that had been kept secret throughout his childhood and academic years. My father never mentioned anything about federal law enforcement. We thought David worked for some kind of government consulting company in Washington. Agent Chen's explanation revealed the operational security requirements that prevented federal officials from sharing details about their government service with family members, who might become targets for foreign intelligence services or criminal organizations seeking to exploit personal relationships for intelligence gathering or operational advantage. Associate Director Thompson's position requires extensive operational security that includes limiting family members' knowledge about his federal service to protect both his operations and your family's safety from potential foreign intelligence targeting. Agent Chen explained with information about security protocols that governed high-ranking federal officials' family relationships. The security protocols had required David Thompson to maintain cover stories about his professional activities while ensuring that his federal service remained secret from family members who could become targets for foreign intelligence services seeking to exploit personal relationships for espionage or operational purposes. Your uncle has been monitoring your family's financial situation and was aware of your attempt to save the farm through auction proceeds. Agent Chen continued with information that revealed ongoing federal interest in the Thompson family's welfare and security. When our investigation identified your consignments at Whitmore Associates, Associate Director Thompson requested that I personally oversee your contact with federal investigators. The personal oversight from Marcus's uncle suggested that his accidental involvement in federal investigations had attracted high-level attention within the FBI hierarchy, potentially providing opportunities for family assistance that would otherwise be unavailable to civilian witnesses in typical criminal investigations. Agent Chen's briefing revealed that Marcus's family had been placed under discreet federal surveillance and protection protocols due to his uncle's position within FBI leadership and the potential for foreign intelligence services or criminal organizations to target family members of high-ranking federal officials. Federal protection protocols for families of senior FBI officials include regular security assessments, financial monitoring, and intervention capabilities designed to prevent foreign intelligence targeting or criminal exploitation of personal relationships. Agent Chen explained with information about comprehensive security measures that protected federal officials' families from potential threats. The protection protocols had been monitoring the Thompson family's financial crisis and were prepared to provide assistance that would prevent foreclosure while maintaining operational security that protected David Thompson's federal service. From potential compromise through family financial vulnerabilities that foreign intelligence services might exploit, your family's foreclosure crisis represents exactly the kind of financial vulnerability that foreign intelligence services systematically target when seeking to compromise federal officials through family pressure and economic coercion. Chen continued with information that revealed how personal financial problems could create national security vulnerabilities. The national security implications of family financial distress had triggered federal intervention protocols designed to protect high-ranking officials from potential compromise while ensuring that family members received assistance without understanding the security considerations that motivated federal involvement. Associate Director Thompson has authorized federal assistance that will address your family's foreclosure crisis while maintaining appropriate operational security for his federal service. Agent Chen announced with information that would transform the Thompson family's desperate financial situation into opportunities for security and stability. The federal assistance included financial intervention that would prevent foreclosure, agricultural support that would enable continued farming operations, and security measures that would protect the family from potential foreign intelligence, targeting or criminal retaliation related to Marcus's involvement in federal investigations. The federal assistance will be structured as agricultural development grants and rural economic support that provides legitimate cover for security-motivated financial intervention. Agent Chen explained with information about how federal agencies could provide family assistance while maintaining operational security for sensitive government operations. The agricultural development grants would provide funding that exceeded the Thompson family's immediate needs for preventing foreclosure, while enabling farm modernization and expansion that would create sustainable economic opportunities that reduced future financial vulnerabilities that foreign intelligence services might exploit. Agent Chen's briefing revealed that Marcus's accidental involvement in federal investigations had provided opportunities for expanded cooperation that could contribute to dismantling international criminal networks while advancing his family's agricultural interests and educational opportunities. Federal investigation has identified systematic criminal exploitation of rural economic distress throughout Pennsylvania and other agricultural states, with international organizations specifically targeting farming families facing foreclosure as cover for money laundering operations. Agent Chen explained with information that revealed the scope of criminal threats to rural communities. The systematic targeting of rural communities represented a national security concern that required comprehensive federal response, including enhanced protection for farming families, improved authentication capabilities for cultural institutions, and international cooperation to address criminal organizations that exploited agricultural heritage for illegal purposes. Your family's situation represents an opportunity to develop enhanced federal programs that protect rural communities from criminal exploitation while preserving agricultural heritage and supporting sustainable farming operations. Agent Chen continued with information about policy development that would benefit rural communities throughout Pennsylvania and other agricultural regions. The policy development included expanded federal support for family farming operations, enhanced security for cultural institutions, and improved authentication resources that would protect legitimate collectors and auction houses from systematic criminal exploitation that threatened cultural heritage preservation. Federal agencies are developing comprehensive programs that will provide financial assistance, security protection, and educational opportunities for farming families who contribute to national security investigations while maintaining their agricultural operations and cultural heritage. Agent Chen announced with information about opportunities that would transform the E. Thompson family's crisis into long-term security and prosperity. The comprehensive programs included agricultural modernization grants, educational scholarships, and career opportunities that would enable Marcus to contribute to federal law enforcement while pursuing his academic interests and maintaining his family's farming heritage. Agent Chen concluded his briefing about federal investigations, family connections, and assistance opportunities. Marcus faced decisions that would determine not only his family's immediate survival, but also his future contributions to protecting rural communities and cultural institutions from systematic criminal exploitation. Mr. Thompson, your cooperation with federal investigations could provide significant benefits for your family while contributing to national security operations that protect American agricultural communities and cultural institutions. Chen explained with information about opportunities that extended far beyond immediate financial assistance. The cooperation opportunities included continued authentication assistance for federal investigations, educational support for advanced training in cultural preservation and law enforcement, and career development that would enable Marcus to contribute to protecting rural heritage and agricultural security from international criminal exploitation. Your unique combination of agricultural expertise and art historical training makes you particularly valuable for federal operations that require understanding both rural cultural heritage and sophisticated authentication techniques. Agent Chen continued with information about specialized career opportunities in federal law enforcement and cultural protection agencies. The career opportunities included positions with the FBI's Art Crime Team, Department of Agriculture Security Operations, and international cooperation programs that addressed criminal exploitation of cultural institutions while supporting rural economic development and agricultural security initiatives. Federal assistance for your family's farm would include modernization grants, security enhancements, and educational opportunities that would enable continued agricultural operations, while providing training and career development for contributing to federal law enforcement and cultural protection missions. Agent Chen announced with information about comprehensive support that would transform the Thompson family's desperate situation into opportunities for service and prosperity. The federal assistance would preserve the Thompson family's four-generation farming heritage while providing Marcus with advanced education and career opportunities that would enable him to protect other rural families from systematic criminal exploitation and cultural heritage fraud. Tomorrow, we'll reveal how Marcus's decision to cooperate with federal investigations would lead to a shocking discovery about Associate Director David Thompson's most classified operation and why the agricultural heritage fraud was just the beginning of an international conspiracy that threatened American rural communities and democratic institutions. Through systematic cultural and economic warfare, the story was accelerating toward revelations that would expose the full scope of foreign intelligence operations targeting American agricultural security. And Marcus was beginning to understand that his family's simple farming operation had accidentally intersected with national security threats that reached far beyond auction house fraud and money laundering schemes. Marcus Thompson's desperate attempt to save his family farm had accidentally exposed a $70 million international art fraud operation. FBI Special Agent Robert Zozle Chen revealed that Marcus's authentic family items had helped identify over 200 fraudulent lots used for money laundering. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. Marcus's uncle David Thompson was the FBI Associate Director, and the family had been under federal protection. Now, as Marcus faced the choice to cooperate with federal investigations, he was about to discover that this conspiracy reached far deeper than anyone imagined. As Marcus processed Agent Chen's revelations about his uncle's FBI position in the international criminal conspiracy, the distinctive sound of rotors filled the air above Whitmore and Associates Auction House. Through the elegant Georgian windows, Marcus could see a sleek black helicopter bearing federal law enforcement markings settling onto the auction house's rear parking area with the precision that suggested official government business rather than routine law enforcement activities. That would be Associate Director Thompson, Agent Chen said with professional satisfaction while checking his secure communication device for encrypted messages from federal command centers. He requested immediate transport from FBI headquarters. Once our investigation identified the scope of criminal activities we've uncovered through your family's authentication assistance, the helicopter's arrival created immediate concern among the auction house's wealthy clientele, who were unaccustomed to federal law enforcement presence at their exclusive cultural events. Marcus watched through the windows as elegantly dressed collectors and dealers gathered in small groups, their conversations revealing obvious anxiety about potential connections between their collecting activities and whatever federal investigation. had brought FBI leadership to their prestigious auction house. Victoria Whitmore appeared in the reception area with the kind of professional composure that auction house administrators developed for managing unexpected situations that might affect their institution's reputation among wealthy collectors and cultural institutions that provided their primary business relationships. Ladies and gentlemen, please continue with your purchase arrangements while federal officials conduct routine authentication procedures. Victoria announced with careful diplomacy that sought to minimize disruption, while acknowledging the obvious federal presence that had attracted everyone's attention. The euphemistic reference to routine authentication procedures failed to calm the obvious anxiety among collectors who understood that FBI, helicopters, and high-ranking federal officials didn't typically attend auction houses for routine business, suggesting that whatever federal investigation was occurring involved serious criminal activities that could affect their collecting interests or personal reputations. The man who emerged from the federal helicopter and strode purposefully toward the auction house entrance bore little resemblance to the government consulting uncle that Marcus remembered from childhood family gatherings. Associate Director David Thompson wore an expensive charcoal suit that projected federal authority while maintaining the professional discretion required for senior law enforcement officials whose public appearances could affect sensitive investigations and national security operations. At 52, David Thompson had spent 28 years in federal law enforcement, beginning as a special agent investigating white-collar crime before advancing through supervisory positions that culminated in his current role as one of the FBI's highest-ranking officials responsible for coordinating complex investigations that crossed jurisdictional boundaries and involved international cooperation with allied law enforcement agencies. His physical presence commanded immediate respect from the auction house staff and federal agents, who recognized his authority while understanding that his personal involvement in field operations indicated extraordinary circumstances that required direct leadership from FBI headquarters rather than routine delegation to regional offices. Marcus, I owe you an explanation about family matters that I've had to keep secret for operational security reasons, David said as he embraced his nephew, with obvious relief and affection that revealed the personal concern behind his professional involvement in the investigation. Your safety and your parents' welfare have always been my priority, even when federal service requirements prevented me from providing direct family assistance. The reunion between uncle and nephew occurred under circumstances that neither could have imagined. A prestigious auction house that had become the center of a federal investigation into international criminal conspiracy, with Marcus's innocent attempt to save his family's farm having accidentally provided crucial evidence for dismantling sophisticated money laundering operations. Uncle David, Agent Chen, explained that you're associate director of the FBI. But I still don't understand how our family farm situation connects to federal investigations and international criminal organizations, Marcus said with honest confusion, about the transformation of his personal crisis into a national security investigation. David's explanation revealed the sophisticated intelligence operations that had been monitoring threats to American cultural institutions while protecting federal officials, families from potential foreign intelligence targeting, and criminal exploitation that could compromise sensitive government operations. Marcus, we've accidentally uncovered, represents the largest international conspiracy to exploit American cultural institutions that federal law enforcement has ever documented. David began with information that would transform Marcus's understanding of his inadvertent contribution to protecting national security interests. Associate Director Thompson's briefing revealed a classified federal operation that had been investigating systematic foreign intelligence penetration of American cultural institutions through sophisticated criminal networks that exploited auction houses, museums, and private collectors to achieve economic warfare objectives against American democratic institutions. Operation Cultural Shield has been tracking foreign intelligence services from China, Russia, and Iran that have developed coordinated strategies for undermining American cultural sovereignty through systematic exploitation of art and antique markets. David explained while displaying classified intelligence reports that documented the international scope of threats to American cultural institutions. The foreign intelligence operations had specifically targeted American agricultural heritage and rural Cultural artifacts because they represented vulnerable sectors where authentication was difficult and federal oversight was limited, enabling systematic fraud that achieved multiple strategic objectives including economic disruption, cultural degradation, and intelligence gathering about American rural communities. Foreign intelligence analysis identified American agricultural communities as strategic targets because rural economic distress creates opportunities for exploitation, while agricultural heritage represents cultural identity that foreign adversaries seek to undermine through systematic fraud and market manipulation. David continued with classified intelligence that revealed the scope of foreign threats to American rural sovereignty. The strategic targeting of agricultural communities represented sophisticated foreign intelligence understanding of American cultural and economic vulnerabilities, with systematic operations designed to accelerate rural economic decline while corrupting cultural institutions that preserved American agricultural heritage and rural identity. The agricultural heritage fraud operation that Marcus accidentally exposed represents just one component of broader foreign intelligence warfare against American rural communities and cultural institutions. David revealed with information that transformed Marcus's auction house experience into evidence of systematic foreign attacks on American sovereignty. The broader foreign intelligence operations included manipulation of agricultural commodity markets, systematic targeting of farming families facing financial distress, corruption of rural banking institutions, and exploitation of cultural heritage markets to achieve economic warfare objectives that weakened American rural communities while generating illegal funding for foreign intelligence services. Federal counterintelligence operations have identified over $2 billion in illegal foreign transactions through American cultural institutions during the past 5 years, with agricultural heritage fraud representing approximately $200 million in systematic foreign exploitation of rural communities. David announced with classified intelligence that revealed the massive scope of foreign economic warfare against American cultural sovereignty. As Associate Director Thompson briefed Marcus about the classified aspects of Operation Cultural Shield. Federal coordination centers throughout Washington were implementing the largest international law enforcement operation in FBI history, with simultaneous raids and arrests occurring across 12 countries to dismantle the criminal networks that had been exploiting cultural institutions for money, laundering, and foreign intelligence purposes. Marcus, your authentication assistance enabled federal investigators to identify specific criminal organizations and their operational methods, providing crucial evidence for international law enforcement coordination that began at dawn today. David explained while displaying real-time operational reports from federal agencies, conducting coordinated enforcement actions. The international enforcement operation involved coordination between American federal agencies and law enforcement organizations in Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, Germany, France, and 6 other allied nations where similar cultural institution exploitation had been documented through intelligence sharing and cooperative investigation efforts. Federal agents and international law enforcement partners have arrested 342 individuals involved in systematic cultural institution fraud, with simultaneous seizure of over $500 million in illegal assets and recovery of thousands of stolen or fraudulent cultural artifacts. David announced with operational reports that documented the massive scope of international criminal enterprise that Marcus had accidentally helped expose. The enforcement operation included raids on sophisticated forgery operations in Eastern Europe, money laundering centers in South America, and coordination facilities in Asia, where international criminal organizations had developed systematic capabilities for exploiting cultural institutions throughout the democratic world. The Whitmore Associates Auction House has been cleared of wrongdoing, with federal investigation confirming that they were victims of systematic criminal exploitation rather than willing participants in fraudulent activities. David continued, with information that protected the auction house's reputation while acknowledging their cooperation with federal investigations. The auction house's cooperation had provided federal investigators with crucial documentation about suspicious consignments, unusual bidding patterns, and authentication concerns that had enabled identification of systematic fraud while protecting legitimate collectors and cultural institutions from continued criminal exploitation. Harrison Blackwell and 12 other prominent dealers have been arrested for conspiracy to defraud cultural institutions, with federal charges including money laundering, fraud, and violation of foreign agent registration requirements. David announced with information about the arrest of individuals Marcus had encountered during his auction house experience. The arrest of prominent cultural professionals revealed the sophisticated recruitment strategies that international criminal organizations had used to penetrate legitimate cultural institutions while maintaining operational security that had prevented detection by traditional law enforcement and cultural security measures. As federal enforcement operations dismantled international criminal networks, Associate Director Thompson revealed comprehensive assistance programs that would transform the Thompson family's desperate financial situation while providing security, protection, and educational opportunities that acknowledged Marcus's contribution to national security investigations. Marcus: federal assistance for your family includes immediate financial intervention that will prevent foreclosure while providing long-term agricultural development support that ensures sustainable farming operations. David announced with information about comprehensive federal programs designed to protect rural families from economic exploitation while preserving agricultural heritage. The federal assistance included a $250,000 agricultural development grant that would eliminate the family's debt while funding farm modernization and expansion that would create sustainable economic opportunities for continued agricultural operations that preserve for generations of farming heritage while contributing to American food security and rural economic stability. The agricultural development grant will be administered through legitimate Department of Agriculture programs that provide appropriate cover for security-motivated assistance while ensuring that your family's farming operations receive genuine support for sustainable development. David explained with information about federal programs that balance security requirements with authentic. The federal assistance extended beyond immediate financial relief to include educational scholarships, career development opportunities, and security protection that would enable Marcus to contribute to federal law enforcement while pursuing his academic interests and maintaining his family's agricultural heritage. Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service has offered you a full scholarship for their new agricultural security and cultural protection program, which will prepare you for federal service while advancing academic research into protecting rural communities from international exploitation. David announced with educational opportunities that combined Marcus's interests with national security requirements. The specialized academic program had been developed specifically to train federal agents and policy specialists who could address the sophisticated threats that foreign intelligence services pose to American agricultural communities and cultural institutions through systematic economic warfare and cultural degradation operations. Federal career opportunities include positions with the FBI's Cultural Property Protection Unit, Department of Agriculture's Security Operations, and international cooperation programs that address foreign intelligence exploitation of American rural communities. David continued with career development that would enable Marcus to protect other farming families from systematic criminal and foreign intelligence targeting. The federal assistance transformed the Thompson family farm from a foreclosure target into a model operation for sustainable agriculture and rural security that would demonstrate federal commitment to protecting American farming heritage while contributing to national food security and rural economic development initiatives. The Thompson Farm will serve as a federal demonstration site for agricultural security programs that protect rural communities from foreign intelligence targeting while promoting sustainable farming practices that enhance American food security. David explained with information about the farm's new role in federal agricultural and security programs. The demonstration site designation included enhanced security protection, research opportunities, and policy development that would enable the Thompson family to continue their agricultural operations while contributing to federal efforts to protect rural communities from systematic foreign exploitation and criminal targeting. Federal agricultural security programs will provide ongoing support for organic certification, sustainable farming practices. It's an agricultural heritage preservation that maintains your family's farming traditions while demonstrating effective protection against foreign intelligence and criminal exploitation. David continued with information about comprehensive support that preserved family heritage while serving national security interests. The agricultural security programs included enhanced financial support, technical assistance, and research opportunities that would enable the Thompson farm to serve as a model for rural economic development that resisted foreign intelligence. Penetration while maintaining traditional farming practices and cultural heritage. Your parents' expertise in sustainable agriculture and rural economic development will be recognized through federal consulting positions that enable them to assist other farming families while contributing to policy development that protects American agricultural communities from systematic foreign threats. David announced with career opportunities that valued the Thompson family's agricultural expertise while contributing to national security objectives. The consulting positions included travel opportunities, policy development work, and educational responsibilities that would enable Robert and Sarah Thompson to share their agricultural expertise while contributing to federal programs designed to protect rural communities from foreign intelligence and criminal exploitation. The revelation of Marcus's uncle's FBI position and his accidental contribution to exposing international criminal conspiracy had created extraordinary career opportunities that combined his agricultural background, art historical training, and demonstrated courage in challenging authority when confronting systematic wrongdoing that threatened American interests. Marcus, your unique combination of agricultural expertise, cultural knowledge, and demonstrated integrity makes you ideally qualified for federal service that protects American rural communities and cultural institutions from sophisticated foreign threats. David explained with career opportunities that would enable Marcus to serve national security interests while maintaining his agricultural heritage and academic interests. The federal career opportunities included specialized training in counterintelligence, cultural authentication, and agricultural security that would prepare Marcus for leadership roles in protecting American rural communities from systematic foreign exploitation while advancing policies that supported sustainable agriculture and cultural heritage preservation. The FBI's Cultural Property Protection Unit is developing enhanced capabilities for addressing foreign intelligence, exploitation of American cultural institutions, with particular emphasis on agricultural heritage and rural material culture, that represents strategic targets for economic warfare operations. David continued with information about specialized federal units that required Marcus's expertise and background. The specialized federal units included international cooperation programs, rural security initiatives, and cultural protection operations that addressed the sophisticated threats that foreign intelligence services pose to American agricultural communities and cultural institutions through systematic criminal exploitation and economic warfare strategies. Your academic research into agricultural heritage preservation and European rural development models provides valuable expertise for federal programs that seek to protect American farming communities while promoting sustainable agricultural practices that enhance national food security. David announced with recognition of Marcus's scholarly contributions to agricultural policy and rural development, the academic expertise would be enhanced through advanced federal training, graduate education opportunities, and research positions that would enable Marcus to contribute to policy development while pursuing scholarly interests in agricultural heritage, rural economic development, and cultural preservation that serve both academic and national security objectives. Marcus's accidental exposure of international criminal conspiracy and his contribution to the largest cultural institution protection operation in federal law enforcement history had attracted attention from allied nations and international organizations responsible for protecting cultural heritage and agricultural security from systematic foreign exploitation. The United Nations Educational Science. The specialized federal units included international cooperation programs, rural security initiatives, and cultural protection operations that addressed the sophisticated threats that foreign intelligence services pose to American agricultural communities and cultural institutions through systematic criminal exploitation and economic warfare strategies. Your academic research into agricultural heritage preservation and European rural development models provides valuable expertise for federal programs that seek to protect American farming communities while promoting sustainable agricultural practices that enhance national food security. David announced with recognition of Marcus's scholarly contributions to agricultural policy and rural development. The academic expertise would be enhanced through advanced federal training, graduate education opportunities, and research positions that would enable Marcus to contribute to policy development while pursuing scholarly interests in agricultural heritage, rural economic development, and cultural preservation that serve both academic and national security objectives. Marcus's accidental exposure of international criminal conspiracy and his contribution to the largest cultural institution protection operation in federal law enforcement. History had attracted attention from allied nations and international organizations responsible for protecting cultural heritage and agricultural security from systematic foreign exploitation. The United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization has selected you to receive the Young Cultural Heritage Defender Award for your contribution to protecting international cultural institutions from systematic criminal exploitation. David announced with international recognition that acknowledged Marcus's courage and analytical contributions to protecting cultural sovereignty. The international recognition included opportunities to address international conferences, participate in cultural protection initiatives, and contribute to policy development that strengthened international cooperation for protecting cultural institutions from foreign intelligence and criminal exploitation that threaten democratic societies throughout the world. Allied nations have invited you to participate in international agricultural security programs that address foreign intelligence targeting of rural communities, while promoting sustainable farming practices that enhance food security and rural economic stability. David continued with international opportunities that would enable Marcus to contribute to protecting agricultural heritage worldwide. The international opportunities included educational exchanges, research positions, and diplomatic training that would prepare Marcus for career opportunities in international service, while continuing his family's commitment to agricultural excellence and cultural preservation that served both American and international security interests. NATO agricultural security initiatives are developing enhanced capabilities for protecting member nations, rural communities from foreign intelligence exploitation, with particular emphasis on cultural heritage preservation and sustainable farming, practices that maintain agricultural sovereignty. David announced with information about international cooperation that valued Marcus's expertise and background. 6 months after his humiliating experience at Whitmore Associates Auction House, Marcus Thompson had been transformed from a desperate farm boy facing foreclosure into one of the most celebrated young people in federal service while contributing to the largest cultural protection operation in international law enforcement history. Marcus, your courage in challenging powerful interests at the auction house provided federal investigators with crucial evidence that enabled dismantling of international criminal networks while protecting thousands of farming families from systematic exploitation. David said with obvious pride in his nephew's contribution to protecting American rural communities and cultural institutions. The Thompson family farm had been transformed from a foreclosure target into a thriving agricultural operation that served as a federal demonstration site for sustainable farming practices while contributing to agricultural security programs that protected rural communities from foreign intelligence and criminal exploitation. The federal government has provided your family with permanent agricultural development support that ensures sustainable farming operations. While recognizing your contribution to protecting American agricultural heritage and rural economic security, David announced with long-term assistance that preserved family farming traditions while serving national security interests. The permanent support included ongoing research funding, educational opportunities, and security protection that would enable the Thompson family to continue their agricultural operations while contributing to federal programs designed to protect rural communities from systematic foreign threats. Your family's story will be taught in federal law enforcement, academies, and agricultural security programs as an example of how ordinary citizens can contribute to protecting American sovereignty through principled resistance to systematic foreign Exploitation, David concluded, with recognition of the Thompson family's contribution to protecting democratic institutions. The Thompson family's experience had become a model for federal programs designed to protect American families from foreign intelligence targeting while strengthening agricultural security and cultural heritage preservation that served both rural, economic development, and national security objectives. The international enforcement operation triggered by Marcus's accidental discovery had resulted in the most comprehensive dismantling of foreign intelligence operations targeting cultural institutions and law enforcement history, with lasting consequences for international criminal organizations and foreign intelligence services that had systematically exploited democratic societies. Federal courts have imposed sentences totaling over 1,200 years of imprisonment, while ordering asset forfeiture of $2.80 billion in illegal proceeds from foreign intelligence operations that violated American sovereignty and cultural integrity. David announced with judicial consequences that reflected the massive scope of criminal enterprise that Marcus had helped expose. The judicial response included enhanced penalties for foreign agent violations, expanded asset forfeiture capabilities for prosecuting international criminal organizations, and strengthened protection for American families whose resistance to foreign pressure contributed to protecting democratic sovereignty and cultural heritage. Congressional legislation based on your family's experience will provide permanent protection for American agricultural communities while strengthening federal capabilities for detecting and prosecuting systematic foreign interference in cultural institutions, David announced, with policy reforms that would protect American sovereignty from similar threats. The legislative response included comprehensive reforms that strengthened American agricultural security, enhanced protection for rural economic stability, and expanded federal capabilities for protecting cultural institutions from systematic foreign exploitation that threatened democratic governance and cultural sovereignty. International cooperation agreements have established enhanced capabilities for protecting democratic societies from foreign intelligence, exploitation of cultural institutions while strengthening agricultural security and rural economic development. Throughout the Allied world, David concluded with international agreements that protected democratic institutions from systematic foreign threats. The international cooperation included enhanced intelligence sharing, coordinated law enforcement operations, and diplomatic initiatives designed to impose consequences on foreign governments that conducted systematic interference operations against cultural institutions while violating international law and diplomatic agreements. Marcus Thompson's journey from desperate farm boy to protect. Marcus Thompson had inherited far more than his family's farming legacy. He had inherited the responsibility for protecting American agricultural heritage and democratic sovereignty from systematic foreign threats. His courage in fulfilling that responsibility had strengthened America's resilience against foreign interference, while creating opportunities for other rural families to resist systematic pressure through federal support and protection. The auction house that had attracted elite buyers who laughed at a farmer's modest bid was now a federal crime scene. But Marcus's real legacy lived in enhanced protection for American democratic institutions, and the knowledge that ordinary families could protect sovereignty through civic courage, moral clarity, and determination to choose truth over convenience when confronted with systematic threats to democratic governance. Marcus Thompson's mission was complete, and the family he had fought to protect had exceeded every expectation for courage, integrity, and commitment to the democratic values that make justice possible, even when it requires extraordinary personal sacrifice and federal protection from systematic foreign threats. The story was finished, but the work of protecting democracy through individual courage and institutional resilience would continue for as long as free societies needed families who were brave enough to choose truth over comfort, justice over safety, and public service over personal convenience when confronted with systematic threats to democratic sovereignty and agricultural independence. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.